Rappoport is going to speak on a little different subject than was listed in the program, because I always want people to speak on what's appropriate and what's the best and latest news and latest things that they have to share with us. A lot of you have heard John on a lot of the radio programs around the country, and some of you heard him here or in Houston when he was with us there last year ago. But he has an enormous amount of stuff to share. He's interested in what will help the country, the individuals, and everything. And we're happy to have here from the wilds of Southern California, Jon Rappoport. Give him a big Global Sciences welcome, please.
Thank you, Dean. Great to be here, folks. Lot to cover. I'm an investigative reporter. Started out writing articles in 1982 for LA Weekly, a Stern magazine in Germany, Spin magazine in New York. Lots of other publications, newspapers and magazines all over the place. I had a radio show in LA for 3 or 4 years and one in Las Vegas, and appeared on Nightline and Hard Copy, and did some writing for CBS Health Watch, Tony Brown's Journal, BBC series on conspiracy. And what I discovered as a reporter was that you could only go up to the line, you know. And then if you said, you know what I want to do? You could see a big safe coming out of the sky, ready to fall on your noggin. Or you were out of a job, or they didn't want to print your stuff, or they suggested you do something else. But there were these, you know, Marceau, you know, the mime. There were these invisible walls that you could not cross as a reporter. Whether you were writing about health or politics or science, any subject, it was the same. And so I became very curious as to what that was all about and why that was and what those walls were, and mostly who was putting them there. And so for the last 20 years, that has been my subject of research, to try to find that out. And recently, I have started my own news service, and you see in front of you, most of you, or some of you, have this piece of paper on the chair. If you don't have one, just reach across and get it. It's about my newsletter, but at the bottom, it's about my new website called nomorefakenews.com. Not too subtle. nomorefakenews.com. So I want to make sure that you give yourselves a good opportunity to go on that site, first opportunity, and you'll see that it is in fact a daily news service. Stories are entered and posted 2-3 times a day, every day. The difference is that I will say something like, CNN today reports on the following, blah, 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 blah. Translation. Here's what it actually means. Here's what's behind the story. Here's what they're not telling you. Here's what they don't want you to know, and here's why they don't want you to know it. And then I'll fill in some background. And so it's a scroll. You start from today's news and you scroll back down to the first day, if you want to, on October 12th, 2000, when I started it, and you will get yourself an entire education starting from the news of the day. See? Because it became very apparent to me as a reporter that the media were posing as the eyes and the ears and the brains and the minds of the public, you see. Saying, this is reality. And none of the other conspiracies about which I found out a great deal as a reporter could hope to survive if it weren't for the media posing as our eyes and ears and minds. So it has become my objective to take that area for myself and to basically take over the media. Simple, just take it over. By convincing enough people that only a fool would seriously watch the news every day and think that they were getting a slice of reality from it. And then saying to them, now that you know what a fool you've been, come look at the actual news. This has some extraordinary consequences when enough people begin to do this. You've heard of the 100 monkey or 50 monkey or 1,000 monkey effect, where when a creature of any kind begins to learn to do something in a new way or think in a new way, that it starts to become contagious on an automatic basis. Well, that's what happens when people begin to actually put aside the media and actually get the truth. That becomes contagious. And the results of that are completely and gloriously unpredictable. Now, I know that there are among us, and I have counted myself as one of those people, cynics who have become so completely fed up with everything that they don't believe that anything can really be done about it. See? And even if consciously they would disagree with that, unconsciously there's something inside them that's saying, I can't do anything about it. Well, I have fought all my life against that premise and continue to fight against it, knowing that it is not true if people will wake up and find within themselves the potential that they really have. So one of the reasons that I've flown here from San Diego is to basically ask for your help. Go on this free website, start reading the news, and tell other people about it. Now, tonight when I do my seminar or workshop, for 3 hours I will be going into a great deal of detail about what that means to become a kind of warrior for the truth. Because it has amazing health effects, is one of the things that I discovered, on the individual. If it comes from a deep enough place. This April I'll be 63 years old. Now there ain't no way that I would still be alive and in fairly decent shape if it weren't for the fact that about at age 30 I decided that I had to dig deep within myself and take a stand and make a position about the truth and not back off of it. And when I began to do that, I found that my health, my personal power, my energy, my clarity, my emotional life, all suddenly took a turn in a revolutionary way. And continue to do that to this day. The process is ongoing. Ongoing, I can guarantee that. And there are, of course, some very interesting challenges along the way, and people that you come up against who try to knock you down, and people who criticized me as a reporter for reporting on certain stories in certain ways. And I would say, let's go public and debate it. You want to stand up with me and talk about AIDS? You want to talk about biowarfare? You want to talk about the CIA? You want to talk about mind control? You want to talk about who's actually running the world? You want to talk about who controls the money? Any of those subjects, I'll be happy to appear in public with you if you have the guts to argue these matters. And then it's kind of funny as to what happens. Suddenly everybody disappears. Oh, well, I said, I'm too busy, I can't show up. and I'm sorry, I wish I could, but it's just the thing, and I'm on vacation, I'll be in Jamaica, and we don't do that sort of thing, and we don't want to give you credibility, and the amazing, marvelous number of excuses that they concoct at that point. Once you begin to say, oh, you think I'm wrong, well, let's get down to it then. See? And that's what I found out. And I found out that the more of those challenges that I actually faced up to, the deeper the well of energy and truth inside myself I was able to tap into. Until the fear factor began to diminish within myself. That fear that every human being has to some degree or another. All these things, in other words, work together is what I'm saying. If you think that a pill is going to give you immortality on its own without you doing anything about it, you are sadly mistaken. I don't care if it's Prozac or herb number 853. And I learned that the hard way, believe me. Now, I'm not saying herbs are bad or nutrition, whatever. My wife is one of the great nutritionists in the world. And one of the great things that I did for myself in the middle 70s was I started to actually eat healthy food. And I know all about that, and it's one of my areas of research. But what I also discovered was that there are many other major factors involved. And one of the biggies is, do you want to be a warrior for the truth or not? It's a funny deal. I'm here, I may as well speak frankly. I didn't fly out here to just give you some baloney. It's one of those questions you have to ask yourself. So I'm asking it. And then you answer it. Maybe not now, but at some point you answer it. You say, yes, I do, or no, I don't. Now what I'm saying is, if the answer is no, certain psychological, spiritual, health, energy factors now begin to come into play for you. It's a real simple thing. This is not esoteric we're talking here. You see? It's like those readout machines where you have, the bars that go up and they go down. Well, if you say, no, I don't want to be a warrior for the truth, which is, everybody's got the right to make a choice. I'm just saying that if you say no, all those indicators that I just mentioned begin to go boop, 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 boop. And the cells in your body actually begin to sit on the couch and watch TV. They say, there's nothing happening here, I'm not being called upon to give my all. Like when this human being was 10 years old and woke up every Saturday morning, and as soon as the sun came over the horizon, they were galvanized by the new day. Remember that? Wow, and we were up like that at the crack of dawn, and we were out there playing baseball and running in the forest and trees and jumping in the water and doing all this stuff. Remember that? And the other cells sitting on the couch watching TV say, yeah, boy, that was something. I don't think we'll ever be called into action like that again. It's called death, okay? That's called death. Let's be frank. The long, slow slide to death. Because if the cells aren't up for it and nobody's knocking at their door, the ball game is basically over. Unless something changes that and reverses it. And what I'm saying is, that can happen at a split second, at a moment's notice. And we've all had experiences like that, where we say, oh my God, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. The cells now suddenly say, hey, here we go, wait a minute, shut off the TV, let's go, something's happening upstairs, we can feel it, we're being called into action. And the energies around those cells begins to percolate, and the colors of those energies begin to change, and the frequency begins to change, and the intensity and the power of that energy around the cells begins to change, and the cells are now coming awake by degrees out of this sort of sloth and dreamlike state and trance, and they're waking up. And they're going, wow, now we have what's called an anti-aging effect, to use a fancy word, or longevity effect. That now is beginning to happen instantaneously. So I discovered this very strange thing for myself, which is the more I went out there and began to argue for the truth of what was actually going on in healing, in health, in politics, in conspiracy, in money, in economics, in the whole world pattern, the younger I got. Now, when I started to research health, the first thing I did was to overlook that completely, of course. Idiot that I was. You don't see the closest thing to home. Well, let's go to the rainforest and see what's happening, and I'm sure they got something here, and the health food store, and I'm going to lectures, and I'm talking and researching, and all that is vital. I'm not putting any of that down. It's vital, vital, vital stuff. But I was overlooking the most basic fact of all. And once I cottoned on to that and realized what was happening, then the effect was even doubled and tripled again and again and again and again. It is a fantastic ongoing experience. And if you don't think it's a kick for a reporter to be able to sit at his computer, type articles directly onto the website from home, have them appear instantaneously on global communication networks all over the world, 2, 3, 5, 10 times a day, as often as I want to. Wow. No filters, no editors, nobody getting in the way, nobody censoring that material, nobody saying I can't put that up there. That is absolutely phenomenal. Now, I'll give you a flavor of just a couple of the stories that I've been tracking here and there on No More Fake News. I obtained a document, CIA document from 1955, which called for the development of certain types of drugs, medical drugs, that would, A, lower the capacity of a person to function intelligently, B, make a person behave in a bizarre manner so that they could be discredited, and several other categories. Now these, at the time, the CIA was not happy with what they had, and they were calling for more research. And I recently got a hold of this document, and I began to look through all my notes on toxic pharmaceuticals, because that's one of my big areas, and it just jumped out at me like a snake. I mean, we've got Prozac, we've got Zoloft, we've got Paxil, we've got Luvox, we've got all those SSRI antidepressant drugs that will cause a person to act in a way that will discredit him by killing himself, by committing murder in a completely irrational manner, and then suicide. We read about these almost every day. I saw another one on the news last night. This guy, Michael McDermott, outside of Boston, who went into his internet company and shot up the place and killed 8 people. And the pundits are saying, we just don't understand why he would have done it. He only owed the IRS $5,000 and this and that and da-da-da-da-dee-dee-dee-da-dee-dee-da. I ran that sucker into the ground on my website. And people began to send sections of the story to the Boston Globe, who was publishing, main newspaper publishing about that particular murder, and they began to write stories. Well, he was on this drug. Yeah, in fact, it was several of these antidepressants. Well, I have the studies and the backup and the data to prove that these drugs cause people to go out and commit murder. Everybody? No. Enough people? Yeah. Does it also allow them to function at a subnormal level? Yes. Right around the time, in fact, that CIA document came out, saw the development of 2 very key drugs in the world. Ritalin, 1953-4, Ciba-Geigy in Switzerland, and Thorazine, 1953-54, in Paris. Now, Thorazine was the first of a series of 20 psychiatric drugs, roughly called neuroleptics, which since 1954 in the United States have caused 1 million cases of motor brain damage. Ritalin is now prescribed for anywhere between 2 and 5.5 million American children for a condition which does not exist, but which has been defined as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, a total fiction, a total series of cookbook bogus symptoms. The drug and its chemical composition, as any medical textbook will show you, is virtually identical to speed. It is amphetamines. It is speed. So the U.S. government is fighting a war on drugs over here, while these docs are over here writing madly prescriptions for speed and giving them to kids 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, 8 years old, to clarify their mental functioning. Is this a drug that is going to, as the CIA wanted, prevent people from functioning at their normal level? You betcha. Oh, you betcha. You betcha. Because as anybody knows who's ever done speed or knows anybody who's done speed, the first thing that happens is usually a kind of revelation. Wow, you mean this is the world? Wow. Where was I for the last 20 years? The first time, if you take it the right dose. But with repeated use, the person begins to come apart at the seams. Aggressive, paranoid, irritable, depressed, can't sleep, cranky. That's where crank comes from. All of these things. Aggressive, violent. We know that one of the shooters at Columbine, Eric Harris, was on one of the SSRI antidepressants, Luvox, and it appears that either he or the other shooter, Dylan Klebold, was also on Ritalin at one time or another, because the Army won't take you if you've taken Ritalin. They know something is a little weird there. And one of those guys was rejected by the Army, presumably for having taken Ritalin. So one of the things that I'm doing on No More Fake News is exposing the global chemical war against the population of Earth through pharmaceuticals. And showing that this is an agenda. This is not a series of baffling, incompetent accidents, stupidities, or we're doing the best we can, we're trying. It has nothing to do with that. This is an intentional agenda being carried out on the people of the planet to create more chaos, to debilitate, demoralize, destroy, maim lives across the board. Now, when I start running stories like this every day, people begin to take notice. Especially when I start giving them the citations on the drug studies and what the drugs actually do, and reports on this school shooting that had that drug connected with it, and putting it all together and editorializing and so forth, and making it snappy. When you'll see when you go on No More Fake News, it's not like, it's not like, oh yeah, here's 30 pages of tiny print, just what I wanted. This is like pow, 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 pow. People begin to get aware. And they begin to make moves based on that. And they begin to copy sections of it and send them to people. And they begin, in one case, 2 cases so far, to actually start to form groups based on the information, particularly on toxic pharmaceuticals. In other words, people that ordinarily would be watching Dan Blather start to be getting their news from No More Fake News. And they begin to take action based on it. Now, some people would say, well, but all of this is negative news. Let's get rid of that false distinction. Over here we have the positive news, the wonderfulness of everything, and over here we have the dark, paralyzing, negative, horrible, fatiguing news. Now, what that does is it makes a sort of trivial and false distinction between different parts of the human soul and the human mind. It's either cotton candy over here with a cherry on top, or it's, dark clouds crushing people's brains over here, No, that's not it. That's a false distinction. It's based on a false psychology. The truth of the matter is that the only thing negative is when a person is paralyzed from acting. That's negative, okay? That is negative. If a person is paralyzed from taking action, then they're in a negative state. And some of what is measured by some of the cutting-edge alternative medical techniques is actually measuring that energy, except it's not being isolated at its core for what it is. And I remember I gave a talk some years ago to a bunch of alternative practitioners in Santa Monica because I was running for Congress there against Henry Waxman, who's one of the major lunatics aligned with the medical pharmaceutical cartel, among other things. And so I got these alternative practitioners in a room, and I said, okay, how many of you have ever done a political diagnosis on a patient? They thought, oh man, this guy's wacko. What is he talking about? Why are we here? And I said, no, I'm serious. You lay the patient out on the table, you take this, you do dark field that, you've got electromagnetic this, you're muscle testing, you're doing all these kinds of things. How many of you have ever done a political diagnosis? What is the state of that person's political awareness? If we take it back to the original meaning in the Greek, which is polis, P-O-L-I-S, meaning community. I said, because you're seeing the effects of that in the body of that patient, whether you know it or not. And it's all based on the question of, are they too paralyzed to take action in what they know to be true? Some of the effects that you're seeing come from that, and the remedy for that is to discover what it is that's going on there and to begin to break that loose. And that's my job, see. That's my self-appointed task, is to break that loose. And I don't mind taking a sledgehammer to it. And sometimes people say, I don't want to see this guy, and it's too heavy, and I don't like it. Whatever. I say, fine. Just wear earphones, listen to music, and watch my lips. You'll get the same message. Okay? It'll still work out. It's like cracking a big piece of ice. Are you going to go like this, or are you going to take the thing and you're going to pow? And a few of the practitioners came up to me afterwards, and I've talked to them since, and they've said to me, actually we're beginning to see that, what you're talking about here. Because we've tried everything on this guy. We've sent him and referred him and did this to him, and until he had 8 million different supplements on the counter in his kitchen, and still nothing was really happening. But when we looked at this, something began to happen. And I said, well, I know it will, because I've done that with people. I just start off and say, well, what do you really believe in? For real now. Let's, does it make any difference to you whether or not people live or die, for example? Is that important at all? How about on a scale of 1 to 10? And you begin talking this way with people, and pretty soon some emotion begins to come up to the surface, and they begin to talk about stuff that, is covered over, that they actually do care about. And then you say, well, what would happen if you took a stand on that? Oh, no. You kidding? Wake me up when it's over. All right? But when a person does make that kind of move, the health consequences, everything, all those indicators begin to change automatically. The energy levels, the quality of the energy, the power, the emotion, the cellular health, the whole deal automatically begins to change. You see? Story. I know a woman in Northern California who for years has been collecting information on pesticides because she lives in an agricultural country. Okay. She had a daughter who got very sick, almost died, and the mother was basically schizophrenic. You know, she had a library of information over here about all the pesticides. She knew everything that you could know. And over here she has a very sick daughter, and she's taken the daughter to the doctor, and the doctor's giving the daughter drugs. So we had several conversations, and finally I said, look, I'm sending a torpedo your way, and if you don't like it, it's too bad, because your daughter's life is in balance here. Don't you get it? Don't you see that all of this information over here, which you've been accumulating for years and doing nothing with, really, substantially, is connected to what over here is driving you crazy, that your daughter is dying? I mean, come on. Because I knew from the way she described the situation that that's what had happened. The daughter had been poisoned repeatedly in different ways by several different pesticides. Okay? And finally, she came to terms with that. She came to grips with it. She herself had some health problems that didn't have to do particularly with pesticides. And when she put those two things together like that, and she began to act on it, and she began to organize people, and she began to put out the information, and she began to do all these kinds of things, and went into that doctor's office and said, no more of this crap. We're going to sit down and talk right now. Sit down. And I'm going to tell you what you don't know about what's happening with my daughter. And then if you've got anything useful to tell me, maybe I'll follow it. Otherwise, get lost. Because you've been nothing but a toxic overload on what's already happened to her. Well, the doctor began to get his head on a little straighter. And the daughter eventually recovered. And this woman was not the same, and her health problems went away magically. And her whole energy level changed, and her whole face changed, her whole outlook, her whole aura, her whole energy, her whole everything began to change. Did she become an eternally, forever, moment by moment happy person? No, she didn't. She wasn't going to make that anyway by the other route that she was trying to take. But what is happening to her is that she is becoming more vital and alive, and that is definitely part of the definition of what happy is. I got a lot of stories like that. Whole lot of stories like that. And it's made me come up with a kind of a protocol of steps that anybody can do that will cost you almost nothing, no money to do, that will revolutionize your health. About 5, 6 things. Okay? Based on my experience and the experience of many other people and what I've been telling you in the last 40 minutes or so here. I'm going to go over all those steps in detail in the workshop. And I'm not trying to hold anything back from you here. I'm just telling you that if I start to get into that, it'll be 3 hours. And I won't have time to cover anything well. But that's what I'm going to talk about tonight, as well as a bunch of other things. I'm also going to talk about things like mad cow disease and, the lies of what that all terrorist operation is. these are the kinds of stories that come up on No More Fake News all the time. And the other thing that I do want to tell you about, if you'll forgive a little bit of shameless self-promotion, is this is a newsletter. You can subscribe to it on the website with a credit card, or you can buy it here. It's 52 issues, emailed to you once a week for a year, and it costs $50. I mean, you can't do any better than that. What it is if No More Fake News is the truth about what the news is every day, the newsletter is who's behind all of these manipulations. Who is it, really? And that's a subject I've been on the tail of for 20 years since I started being a reporter. And my conclusion to that is that there are 7 cartels that run this planet. These are major groups of people. They represent 7 major areas of human life and activity. They are coordinated. They work together. There is some competition, but basically they have formed a solid agenda. The newsletter describes exactly what that's all about. Every week, more and more information on their history, their operations, what they're doing, what they're planning, how they manipulate populations, how they use mind control in all of the various ways and strategies that they have for that. How these are very real entities, and these are the guys that have to be overcome and outdistanced if we want a planet based on freedom. And that's what that newsletter is. And back there at my booth, you can come and feel free to subscribe. You can also do that at the workshop tonight or at any time while I'm here until Sunday morning. Feel free to come up. I want to get together with people and sit down in small groups and go into as much detail of this as I can. I decided that I was going to do this as well. I've got 4 books here that I've written. They're back there. It's sort of the last of the dregs of Dean and I have been going back and forth ever since the first time I came out here because I brought too many books with me. And we're now going to get rid of them. All of them. So, this is The Secret Behind Secret Societies. We have some copies of that. Goes a great deal in depth into what is the common denominator among all of these groups. How do they operate? What is the way that they are actually manipulating the human soul? Oklahoma City Bombing, The Suppressed Truth, a book I wrote in 1995 about the truth and the lies of that story. Madeline Murray O'Hare, back in the news, the most hated woman in America. That was a murder case that I wrote about. The murder has now, I believe, been finally solved, and I predicted who the murderer would be in the book about a year and a half before they finally arrested David Waters. And this is a 1988 book called AIDS, Inc., which is, as far as I can tell, there aren't any around left except for about 4 copies over there in my booth. And so, for anybody who subscribes to this dandy newsletter, you can take one of these books, any one that you want, for free and be off. And we will get rid of all of these in one shot that way. Can't make a better deal for you than that. Closing, good, 15 minutes, okay. Let me tell you a little bit about mad cow disease. Here's a perfect example of a story. It's starting to come out in the press, right? Korea, they don't want beef, and the French are going crazy, and the Germans are absolutely psychotic, right? To say to a German, you can't eat beef anymore, is like, saying you can't drink beer anymore, right? They're going nuts in Germany. There was a story about some people that broke into a zoo and killed a few animals in Germany and ate them, right? That's how insane they're going to... Really, this is true. England, of course, is supposedly the home of mad cow, and they're going completely insane there. And now it's Canada, and the United States is next. The stories are starting to come out, and they're talking about, and the populations. And then there's the human variation called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, a name that would inspire terror even if somebody made it up out of the blue, right? Yeah, I believe he's got Creutzfeldt-Jakob, And then there's another one called Kuru that's kind of like that too, see? And man, do they make capital on this stuff, right? So they're talking about prions as being the cause. And they think, well, they've been feeding these cows for years, ground up cows and ground up sheep. And nobody stopped to seriously consider the consequences of that, since the last thing a cow wants to eat is other cows, right? They just do it anyway. But that kind of analysis doesn't appeal to the medical boys, you know. You're not going to see the head of the National Institutes of Health saying, after a serious study, we've decided that you just can't feed a cow ground up cow, you know. Somebody's going to say, you went to school for 12 years to figure that out, you know? It just isn't going to fly. So they have to say, no, within the crushed up cow that they're feeding to the cow, there are these mysterious elements called prions. And this, we believe, we think, is what's causing mad cow disease. And you say, oh, wow. And people in the public will say, oh, yeah, you know, prions, yeah. And they'll start talking, hey, have you heard about the prions? You know, where are they? Step out of the way. Prion is a protein, small protein particle. And some of these researchers are trying to float the absurd idea that somehow these little protein particles are actually infectious and they can communicate disease, whatever. Now, the reason I say absurd is because they haven't even halfway established the truth of this. I mean, it isn't even close. It would be like my saying, you know, let's do it this way. Centers, that's the word I saw. Centers is the cause of mad cow disease. Everyone goes, well, we have studies on this. They've done at Cornell, they've been done at National Institutes of Health. Centers. And the newspapers get a hold of this, and the word becomes, everybody goes, centers, yeah, whoa. And nobody has the slightest idea what they're talking about. And pretty much with prion research, that's where they are. They have no idea what they're talking about. But it's the cause of this disease, you see, and it's contagious. Now, a protein, you know, it's like saying, if we took a little piece out of a tree and we put it in your mouth, you will get sick, and the person next to you will also get sick. Oh, really? How's that? Well, one very smart farmer named Mark Purdy, who lives in Britain, is a cow farmer, decided this was crazy. He had another idea, that an insecticide called Fosmet was the real culprit. Now, Fosmet is something that they take because they have something in England called the warble fly, which is very British, wouldn't you say? The warble fly. Like in California, they have the med fly, and they have to eradicate it with helicopters, bombing everybody with malathion, you know, based on nerve gas research. Well, Fosmet is also based on nerve gas research because it's an organophosphate. So they take this Fosmet and they lay it across the spine of the cow to eradicate the warble fly. Now, this is a highly toxic compound, okay, made by a corporation called Zeneca, which is a spin-off of Imperial Chemical Industries, a British giant chemical company who used to have ties to IG Farben, the infamous Nazi cartel, chemical cartel, where all the original organophosphate research was done at IG Farben. And it turns out that Fosmet is incredibly toxic and destroys tissue, like brain tissue, for example. And this guy Purdy went around, and he actually found out where they were finding these human mad cow cases in England, and wherever he went, they were using Fosmet. It's making a lot of sense. But it was very dangerous for this guy. His house was burned down. His barn was destroyed, and it collapsed on his library of scientific medical materials. His telephone wires were cut. He was shot at. Strange people began coming up to his wife on his property and talking to her, whom she had never seen before. A lawyer who defended him in a court case in England on a related matter, which he won, The lawyer was killed in a strange automobile accident, and a veterinarian friend of Purdy, who sort of sided with him on his analysis of mad cow disease, also died in a mysterious car accident. If it were to come out that Fosmet were actually the cause of mad cow disease, suddenly Zeneca Corp and Imperial Chemical Industries would be liable for, I don't know, $300-400 billion? Easy. And then all the other chemical companies that make organophosphates would suddenly find themselves sued as well. So you can see there's just a little bit of pressure on this guy so that his research does not see the light of day. And David Brown, a researcher out of the University of Cambridge in England, did some research that backed up a lot of what Purdy said, and Brown promptly lost his research grants. So you take a story like that, as I did on No More Fake News, and started to run with it. Started to present different parts of it and pieces of it, and people started reprinting it and taking it off there and looking at it and thinking about it and emailing people and talking to people. And so the whole frame of that, because what we're talking about here is terrorism, you know. How do you make people afraid? You make them afraid by screaming at them about some disease caused by something called a prion that nobody can get away from. Instead of saying, what we advise you to do is to find out if this cow that you're about to eat has been sprayed or laced with Fosmet. Now that might be difficult, but it's certainly a lot more doable and rational. Because the day after somebody makes that pronouncement, you can bet your ass that some organic farmers are going to show up and say, hey, hello, here we are. We don't use organophosphates. You want to buy beef that doesn't have that? You buy it from us. It's like reframing the truth so that it is the truth, and also it is no more terrorism. That's another purpose of what I'm trying to do here. And it's amazing what happens to the health of people once you take off the terrorism, too. That's another cause of aging, ill health, is that people don't realize the agenda of terrorizing them through lies, distortions, fantastical inventions that have nothing to do with the truth. And by changing the media, my idea is that we will change all that. It's taken me 20 years to finally come to that simple understanding that that's really what the game ought to be for me, because that's the game that I know the best and one that I happen to like a lot. We could cause a tremendous amount of very good trouble by doing this, believe me. A tremendous amount of very good trouble by beginning to use this wedge to overturn the media control of the human mind on this planet. And when the day dawns, when that actually happens to a great enough percentage, you will see a completely different civilization on this planet, and a completely different level of health, and a completely different version of aging. And I know that these are important issues for everybody. My health, my future in terms of my body and my health. Information. What can I believe? What can I do? The newsletter also covers solutions to some of these problems that are more direct solutions. These 7 cartels that I speak of, one of them is the media cartel. And their job is to install themselves as the public mind. Nothing less. If that can't be sustained, if that isn't going to work anymore, For the majority of people in the world, their game is over, baby. It's finished. It's done. It's gone. And conversely, no matter what else we do, if we don't end that game, all of our work can be surrounded with this false cushion of media reality so that people will not know about it or will believe that it's something completely opposite of what it actually is. And I see progress already. We all see progress already. I can just say that from my angle of experience, it's accelerating the progress in overthrowing the media. I am, even though, part of it says, are you kidding? You'll never be able to blah, blah, da, 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 da. Don't believe that. That's not going to get you anywhere. What I see is it's already happening and it's accelerating. And the acceleration is becoming disturbing because, and I'll end with this, all along for the last 20 years, I've had people coming up to me and saying to me in one way or another, listen, I'm on the inside of something very big and very bad. I want to tell somebody about it off the record. And so I've developed about 100 sources like that from inside these cartels, who themselves feel trapped, but they are giving me information about what is actually going on. And I can tell you that from some of these reports, the media is beginning to get quite nervous. Quite nervous. And I'm talking about not just the reporter on the street, I'm talking about the people who control the media, such as CIA-type folks, are getting very nervous because it's starting to happen now. Every single major piece of mind control coming out of the media is being challenged one for one for one for one. That's why I started this news service, so that I would be in a position to do that every single day. You saw that story? That's a lie. Here's the truth. This one, bah. This one, bah. This one, bah. On and on and on and on and on. And other people are picking up and have already picked up on that kind of strategy, and it's beginning to make people forcibly awakened. So that's what I came to say. I hope to see many of you tonight at the workshop at 6:45 to go into a lot of this in great more detail, including what I mentioned to you as a real protocol for much greater health and longevity and happiness. And thank you.